come to order. Mr. Cohen, I want to finalize this issue relating to your truth in testimony form. The form requires you to list your contracts or payments originating from a foreign government, not from all foreign entities. We said we would give you a chance to consult with your attorneys. Have you done that, and do you have any additional information?
My 4 attorneys continue to believe, as they did before, that the language of the truth in testimony form, which I was given and signed just right before this hearing, and which requires disclosure of any contracts or payments from foreign governments in the last 2 years, did not apply to my work for BTA Bank, which is a Kazakh-owned entity. They advised that had entities been intended for disclosure, that word would have been in the disclosure definition. However, if the committee's counsel has a different view that I should disclose my contract with BTA Bank, we'd be willing to do that.
All right. Now,
Mr. Chairman.
Let me finish.
Sure.
I want to understand clearly, you sought the advice of your counsel, is that right?
That's correct.
And your counsel advised you to say what you just said, is that right?
That's correct.
And you know that to be the truth, is that right?
Yes, sir.
I will yield to the gentleman from
I thank the chairman for his courtesy. Mr. Chairman, instead of making points of order and going back and forth on this, perhaps a way to solve this is for the chairman to request Mr. Cohen give to this committee all the foreign payments that he has received over the last 2 years, whether they're an entity or a government, because we have strong belief, Mr. Chairman, there's over $900,000 that came from the government of Kazakhstan on behalf of Mr. Cohen, and it is either the truth or the whole truth or nothing but the truth. And the rules, Mr. Chairman, really look at foreign payments that come from or with foreign governments. And the bank he's talking about is owned 81% by the Kazakhstan government.
reclaiming my time, and then we're going to move on. What I will take, first of all, let me be clear. I said to Mr. Cohen that if he came in here and lied, I would nail him to the cross. Didn't I? Did I tell you that?
Yes, you did more than once.
All right. So if there's any ambiguity, I want that to be cleared up. I have no problem in working with you to make sure that's straightened out, because I don't want it to be a thing where he thinks one thing, we think one thing, and we can clear that up. All right. All right. We have another members that have been waiting.
But just on that subject, if I could, Mr. Chairman, I don't think we should limit it just to the BTA Bank, which has the affiliation with Kazakhstan. I think we should also look at Korea Aerospace Industries, one of his other clients, and any other client that's foreign that may have some connection to that respective country's government. I hope him and his attorneys look at all those and we get the form exactly right as Mr. Meadows wants.
Reclaiming my time, we will take that certainly under advisement. You are, I'm a man of my word. We will work with you and see what we can do to come up with that. I don't think that it's an unreasonable request. Mr. Guana. Hello? Guana? Yes, yeah.
Mr. Cohen, I want to focus my questions on the smoking gun document you have provided this committee. This document is compelling evidence of federal and state crimes, including financial fraud. You provided this committee with a check from President Donald J. Trump's revocable trust account, which is marked as Exhibit 5B. It is a check for $35,000, and it is dated March 17, 2017, after the President took office. It's right now on the screen. Do you see it, sir?
Yes, sir.
To be clear, the Trump revocable trust is the trust the President set up to hold his assets after he became President. Is that correct?
I believe so.
Do you know why you were paid from the trust as opposed to the President's personal account?
I don't know the answer to that.
Did you think it was odd that he paid you once from his personal account and then he's paying you through the scheme of a trust?
I'll be honest, I was just happy to get the check.
Today you testify that the check was signed by Donald Trump Jr. and the Trump Organization CFO Alan Weisselberg. Is that correct?
That is correct.
According to the criminal charges against you, you sent monthly invoices containing false information to an individual identified as Executive 1. Weisselberg is Executive 1, correct?
Yes.
The criminal charge against you then states that Executive 1 forwarded your invoice to someone referred to as Executive 2. Presumably, Donald Trump Jr., who's signing this check, is Executive 2, correct?
I believe so.
As federal prosecutors laid out in their criminal charges, payments like this check resulted in numerous false statements in the books and records of the Trump Organization. And it's important for the American public to understand this. Nothing to do with collusion. This is financial fraud, garden variety financial fraud. It was disguised as a payment for legal services to you. But this was not a payment for legal services, was it, Mr. Cohen?
No, sir.
It could give rise to serious state and federal criminal liability if a corporation is cooking its books. Based on your testimony today, Donald Trump Jr. and Alan Weisselberg directed this payment to you and approved this payment. Is that right?
Mr. Trump initially acknowledged the obligation, the debt. Myself and Alan Weisselberg went back to his office, and I was instructed by Alan at the time that they were going to do this over 12 installments. And what he decided to do then was to have me send an invoice, in which case they can have a check cut. And then, yes, the answer would be yes to your follow-up.
And Donald Trump Jr. obviously signed off on this.
Yes, well, it would either be Eric Trump, Donald Trump Jr., and or Alan Weisselberg, but always Alan Weisselberg on the check.
And you think Executive 2 is Donald Trump Jr.?
Yes.
They knew that this payment was false and illegal, correct?
I can't make that conclusion.
You told Representative Kelly that the president was aware of this scheme. Is that correct?
That's correct.
I just want the American public to understand the explosive nature of your testimony in this document. Are you telling us, Mr. Cohen, that the president directed transactions in conspiracy with Alan Weisselberg and his son, Donald Trump Jr., as part of a criminal conspiracy of financial fraud? Is that your testimony today?
Yes.
And do you know if this criminal financial scheme that the president, Alan Weisselberg, and Donald Trump Jr. are involved in is being investigated by the Southern District of New York?
I'd rather not discuss that question because it could be part of an investigation that's currently ongoing.
But I just want the American public to understand that solely apart from Bob Mueller's investigation, there is garden variety financial fraud. And your allegation and the explosive smoking gun document suggests that the president, his son, and his CFO may be involved in a criminal conspiracy. And isn't it true, Mr. Cohen, that this criminal conspiracy that involved 4 people, that there's only one person so far who suffered the repercussions, and that's why you're in jail?
We'll be going to jail, yes.
There are 3 other people, though, who were equally involved in this conspiracy. Is that true?
It is true.
Thank you, Mr. Cohen. I yield back my time.
Gomez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Cohen, I'm going to tackle the president's tax returns. During the 2016 campaign, you said you personally wouldn't, quote, allow him to release those returns until the audits are over, unquote. For the record, nothing prevents individuals from sharing their own tax returns, even while under audit by the IRS. Mr. Cohen, do you know whether President Trump's tax returns were really under audit by the IRS in 2016?
I don't know the answer. I asked for a copy of the audit so that I could use it in terms of my statements to the press, and I was never able to obtain one.
Okay. So do you have any inside knowledge about what was in the president's tax returns that he refused to release?
I do not.
Can you give us any insight into what the real reason is that the president has refused to release his tax returns?
Statements that he had said to me is that what he didn't want was to have an entire group of think tanks that are tax experts run through his tax return and start ripping it to pieces, and then he'll end up in an audit, and he'll ultimately have taxable consequences, penalties, and so on.
So that's an interesting point, that basically he said he didn't want to release his tax returns because he might end up in an audit. So could you presume from that statement that he wasn't under audit?
I presume that he's not under audit.
And the reason why I bring this up, because I'm also the only Democrat on this committee that also serves on the Committee of Ways and Means. It's the chief tax writing committee in the House of Representatives. And it's the only committee in the House of Representatives that has jurisdiction to request an American's tax returns, and that includes the President of the United States. My constituents need to know whether the President has financial ties that are causing him to protect his own bottom line rather than the best interests of this country. Can he be blackmailed because of his financial and business ventures, including by foreign governments? And I know the opposition is the first thing they're going to ask or say is that he released his financial disclosure forms. But I believe that there's other things we can learn from his taxes. Do you have any idea what we can learn in his tax returns if we actually we got our hands on them?
No, I've seen them. I just have never gone through them. They're quite long.
Quite long. One of the things I also find ironic is that the way they're kind of attacking you is to undermine your credibility is one of the ways, is by saying that you committed bank fraud and tax evasion. And the reason why is a big deal is that it really goes down to a person's character when it comes to taxes. But yet, the Republican minority has never asked to see his taxes, right? Something that for 40 years, Democrats and Republicans alike have released their tax returns to prove to the American people that they didn't have financial interests that would be leverageable by a foreign government. But this minority refuses to ask for his tax returns. I also want to kind of go on. I'm noticing a pattern. About the president and those in his inner circle. Special counsel Robert Mueller's team has indicted or received guilty pleas from 34 people and 3 companies that we know of, the latest being long-term Trump advisor Roger Stone. That group includes 6 former Trump advisors. It appears that the president has a fondness for entrusting those who will, 1, lie for him, 2, break the law for him, 3, cheat the system for him. Essentially, he wants to surround himself with people who are just like him. Would you agree with that statement?
From the facts and circumstances, it appears so.
Mr. Cohen, the American people have a lot of questions when it comes to this president, to his conduct. When he went to Helsinki and he bowed before Vladimir Putin. And nobody can really understand why he acts the way he acts. And we believe that the way we get those answers is really looking at everybody that surrounds him, who he's been associated with, and his tax returns, because that is the only way that we can get down to the bottom line. Thank you, and I yield back.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent request.
All right, go ahead.
I ask unanimous consent that we read into or for the record, a tweet from Dr. Darrell Scott, which says, Michael Cohen asked, begged me repeatedly to ask POTUS to give him a job in the administration. He is still lying under oath. I ask unanimous consent.
Objection.
I have one more from Bob Deedle. Getting sick watching these hearings. I know Michael Cohen personally for many years, and he told me several times that he was very angry and upset that he didn't get a post in the White House, and that he, quote, would do what he has to do now to protect his family, close quote. I ask that that be.
Mr. Chairman.
I thank you.
Mr. Chairman, 2 quick ones.
And then if we got other ones, we're going to do you, Mr. Ranking Member, then we'll do the other ones at the end, because I have some things, too, that I want to get in. Go ahead.
All right. I ask unanimous consent that an article in Salon magazine written by Stanley Brand, former House counsel to Tip O'Neill, titled the article is Oversight Committee Session with Michael Cohen Looks Like an Illegitimate Show Hearing.
Without objection, so ordered.
I ask unanimous consent that a letter that Mr. Meadows and I sent to you, the chairman, requesting that you call Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein to testify at this hearing, also be part of the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, can I respond?
Just 1 second, all right? The article by Mr. Barron.
Yep.
I just want to deal with this one right away. When we saw that article, Mr. Ranking Member, we knew that it was inaccurate. I mean, just on basics. I mean, the cases that Mr. Brand used are definitely distinguishable for what's going on here. And so we got Irvin B. Nathan, former General Counsel of the House from 2007 to 2010, and she says, in short, the committee has ample jurisdiction and responsibility to hear and consider the upcoming voluntary testimony of Mr. Cohen. That's dated February 25th, 2019, and I want to enter that into record without objection. So ordered. Where are we? Ms. Ocasio-Cortez.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Cohen, I'd like to quickly pick up on some previous lines of questioning before getting into my own, so I may go a little quickly to get it all in 5 minutes. First, my colleague from Vermont had asked you several questions about AMI, the parent company of the National Enquirer. And in that, you mentioned a treasure trove, a quote, treasure trove of documents in David Pecker's office relating to information assembled from all these catch-and-kill operations against people who potentially had damaging information on the president. You also mentioned that the president was very concerned about the whereabouts of these documents and who possessed them. Does that treasure trove of documents still exist?
I don't know. I had asked David Pecker for them.
So you would say the person who knows the whereabouts of these documents would be David Pecker?
David Pecker, Barry Levine, or Dylan Howard.
Okay, thank you. Secondly, I want to ask a little bit about your conversation with my colleague from Missouri about asset inflation. To your knowledge, did the president ever provide inflated assets to an insurance company?
Yes.
Who else knows that the president did this?
Alan Weisselberg, Ron Lieberman, and Matthew Calamari.
And where would the committee find more information on this? Do you think we need to review his financial statements and his tax returns in order to compare them?
Yes, and you'd find it at the Trump org.
Thank you very much. The last thing here, the Trump Golf Organization currently has a golf course in my home borough of the Bronx, Trump Links. I drive past it every day, going between the Bronx and Queens. In fact, the Washington Post reported on the Trump Links Bronx course in an article entitled, "Taxpayers Built This New York Golf Course and Trump Reaps the Rewards." That article is where many New Yorkers and people in the country learned that taxpayers spent $127 million to build Trump Links in a, quote, generous deal, allowing President Trump to keep almost every dollar that flows in on a golf course built with public funds. And this doesn't seem to be the only time the president has benefited at the expense of the public. Mr. Cohen, I want to ask you about your assertion that the president may have improperly devalued his assets to avoid paying taxes. According to an August 21st, 2016 report by the Washington Post, while the president claimed in financial disclosure forms that Trump National Golf Club in Jupiter, Florida, was worth more than $50 million, he had reported otherwise to local tax authorities that the course was worth, quote, no more than $5 million. Mr. Cohen, do you know whether this specific report is accurate?
It's identical to what he did at Trump National Golf Club at Briarcliff Manor.
Do you know, to your knowledge, was the president interested in reducing his local real estate bills, tax bills?
Yes.
And how did he do that?
What you do is you deflate the value of the asset, and then you put in a request to the tax department for a deduction.
Thank you. Now, in October 2018, the New York Times revealed that, quote, President Trump participated in dubious tax schemes during the 1990s, including instances of outright fraud that greatly increased the fortune he received from his parents. It further stated from Mr. Trump, quote, he also helped formulate a strategy to undervalue his parents' real estate holdings by hundreds of millions of dollars on tax returns, sharply reducing his tax bill when those properties were transferred to him and his siblings. Mr. Cohen, do you know whether that specific report is accurate?
I don't. I wasn't there in 1990s.
Who would know the answer to those questions?
Alan Weisselberg.
And would it help for the committee to obtain federal and state tax returns from the president and his company to address that discrepancy?
I believe so.
Thank you very much. I yield the rest of my time to the chair.
Ms. Presley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One more time, Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank you for your leadership and the way in which you comport yourself. And I know there are some that would have you believe that the more you say something, the more true it is. But in fact, this committee, thanks to your leadership and our Democratic majority, has been doing the work of the American people. Before this committee alone, we looked at the issue of making Election Day a federal holiday, reducing drug pricing, and pursued subpoenas to reunite families. And just recently, before we returned here, tried to pass a universal background check gun bill. So we are doing the business of the American people, including today. It has been said that the best sunlight is said to be the best of disinfectants. Electric light is the most efficient policeman. Well, let there be light. Because the point of oversight is for us to pursue the trust, to pursue the truth and justice for the American people, to understand if lies, deceit, and corruption are threatening American democracy and indeed our safety. Mr. Chairman, charities should not be abused as personal piggy banks. It is both against the law and extremely unfair to charities that play by the rules. A line of questioning that we have not yet addressed and we've been glaringly absent in tackling is that of the abuses of the Trump Foundation. Now, the President's Charitable Foundation agreed to dissolve in response to an ongoing investigation and lawsuit by the New York Attorney General. The New York Attorney General found what it called, quote, clear and repeated violations of state and federal law, including, quote, repeated and willful self-dealing by the Trump administration. Apologies, by the foundation. If I understand your opening statement correctly, in mid-2013, you arranged for a straw purchaser to bid $60,000 for a portrait of Mr. Trump painted by the artist William Quigley at a charity auction. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Why would the president want to bid up the price of something that he was ultimately paying for?
It's all about ego.
How was it paid for?
I believe it was paid for by a check from the trust.
And abuse, and again, you know, this is not a partisan pursuit here. I think ultimately what we're demonstrating is patriotism. This is about what is right and just for the American people. Did the straw purchaser purchase the painting and then the foundation funds reimburse the straw purchaser? Can you explain the mechanics of that payment?
I'm not involved with the foundation.
Okay. Did the president know what was happening?
Oh, yes.
And how did you know he knew what was happening?
Because he tasked me to find the straw bidder to ensure that his painting, which was going last in the auction, would go for the highest amount of any of the paintings that had been put on the auction block for the day.
And what happened to the painting?
I believe it's in one of the clubs.
Okay. According to the New York Attorney General in March 2014, Mr. Trump again used the foundation to pay $10,000 for the winning bid on another portrait of Mr. Trump that ended up as decor in one of his golf courses in Miami. Mr. Cohen, are you familiar with that transaction?
Yes.
Are you aware of any other instances where the Trump Foundation was used to benefit the Trump family?
Yes.
Could you elaborate?
So there was a contract that I ended up creating on Mr. Trump's behalf for, it was a Ukrainian oligarch by the name of Viktor Pinchuk. And it was that Mr. Trump was asked to come and to participate in what was the Ukrainian-American Economic Forum. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to go, but I was able to negotiate 15 minutes by Skype where they would have a camera very much like, a television camera very much like that one, and they would translate Mr. Trump to the questioner, and then he would respond back. And I negotiated a fee of $150,000 for 15 minutes. I was directed by Mr. Trump to have the contract done in the name of the Donald J. Trump Foundation, as opposed to Donald J. Trump for services rendered.
Thank you. Any other abuses of the foundation that you'd like to share? Again, it is against the law, and again, extremely unfair to charities that are playing by the rules.
Not at this time, but if I think of one,
Okay.
That's a little-
And then for the balance of my time, would you agree that someone could deny rental units to African Americans, lead the birther movement, refer to the diaspora as shithole countries, and refer to white supremacists as fine people, have a black friend, and still be racist?
yes?
I agree.
Gentlelady's time is expired. You may answer the question.
I did, yes.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I have two unanimous consent. Since we're finishing up, before we get done, I want to go ahead and.
Okay, just give me 1 second. I just wanted
Yes, sir.
to, I wanted to get to Ms. Talib, and then I'll come to you, okay? Ms. Talib, I mean, they've been waiting here all day. Ms. Talib?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, all of you, for centering this committee on our sole purpose, is exposing the truth. And some of my colleagues can't handle the truth, and this is unfortunate because it's the center of what is protecting our country right now. The people at home are frustrated, Mr. Cohen, and they want criminal schemes to stop, especially those from the Oval Office. Mr. Cohen, I am upset and know that my residents feel the same way, that a man you worked for the past 10 years is using the most powerful position in the world to hurt our country solely for personal gain. We are upset that some of our colleagues here are so disconnected of what it means to have this President of the United States sending checks to cover bribe payments, not hush payments, bribe payments you made on his behalf. One in 2017 of March, and another August 2017 after he was sworn in as president. They are upset that while my colleagues are trying to discredit your testimony by some of your own unlawful acts and lies, that they are disconnected with the fact that you were the personal lawyer for this President of the United States, that this President chose you as his legal counsel. My stance has always been the same, Mr. Chairman, based on the facts, not on future reports that we're all waiting on. My residents back home don't need a collusion clause with a foreign government to know this President, Individual 1, has disregarded the law of the land, the United States Constitution, and that he has misused his pardon powers. In the sentencing memo, Mr. Cohen, filed by the federal prosecutors in New York in December of last year, they stated, quote, in particular, and as Cohen himself has now admitted with respect to both payments, he acted in coordination with and at the direction of Individual 1. Mr. Cohen, as you know, President Donald J. Trump brand comes first, not the American people. Based on what you know now, based on what we know now, is that Individual 1 used his money, businesses, and platform to enrich himself, his brand, and then the process directed you, Mr. Cohen, to commit multiple felonies, and you covered it up, correct?
That's correct.
You called it protecting his brand, correct?
And him as well.
Mr. Cohen, with this, do you think the President of the United States is making decisions in the best interest of the American people?
No, I don't.
Especially those you said that he used horrible words about, like African Americans, Muslim Americans, and immigrants?
Yes.
Just to make a note, Mr. Chairman, just because someone has a person of color, a black person, working for them does not mean they aren't racist. And it is insensitive that some would even say it's the fact that someone would actually use a prop, a black woman, in this chamber, in this committee, is alone racist in itself. Donald Trump is setting a precedent.
Mr. Chairman, I ask that her words be taken down.
Donald Trump is setting a precedent. I reclaim my time.
Mr. Chairman.
Trump is setting a precedent.
Mr.
That
Chairman.
the highest office can be attained
Mr. Chairman, the
through
rules
illegal
are clear.
activity. Cover up and hold on to business assets to break campaign finance laws and constitutional clauses. What we have here, Mr. Chairman, is criminal conduct and the pursuit of the highest public office by Mr. Cohen and Individual 1. I hope that the gravity of this situation hits everyone in this body and in Congress and across this country. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield the rest of my time.
Mr. Chairman, I ask that her words, when she's referring to an individual member of this body, be taken down and stricken from the record. I'm sure she didn't intend to do this, but if anyone knows my record as it relates, it should be you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman, I would like to,
Hold on.
I want the words read
No,
back.
no.
We want to know exactly
No,
what she said
excuse me.
about a colleague.
Excuse me. Would you like to rephrase that statement, Ms. Tlaib?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can actually read it from here. Just to make a note, Mr. Chairman, that just because someone has a person of color, a black person working for them, does not mean they are racist. And it is insensitive that someone would even say racist, say it is racist in itself, and to use a black woman as a prop to prove it otherwise. And I can submit this for the record. If a colleague is thinking that that's what I'm saying, I'm just saying that's what I believe to have happened. And if, as a person of color in this committee, that's how I felt at that moment, and I wanted to express that. But I am not calling the gentleman, Mr. Meadows, a racist for doing so. I'm saying that in itself, it is a racist act.
Well, I hope not, Mr. Chairman, because I need to be clear on this particular. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Meadows, wait a minute.
I've defended you with false accusations.
Mr. Meadows, I'm the chair.
Yes, sir, you are.
Thank you. I will clear this up. Now, Ms. Tlaib, I want to make sure I understand. You were not intending to call Mr. Meadows a racist, is that right?
No, Mr. Chairman, I do not call Mr. Meadows a racist.
No,
I am trying,
as
a person of color, Mr. Chairman, just to express myself and how I felt at that moment. And so, just for the record, that's what was my intention.
All right. All right. Mr. Meadows.
Mr. Chairman, there's nothing more personal to me than my relationship. My nieces and nephews are people of color. Not many people know that. You know that, Mr. Chairman. And to indicate that I asked someone who is a personal friend of the Trump family, who has worked for him, who knows this particular individual, that she's coming in to be a prop, it's racist to suggest that I asked her to come in here for that reason. Mr. President, the President's own person, she's a family member. She loves this family. She came in because she felt like the President of the United States was getting falsely accused. And Mr. Chairman, you and I have a personal relationship that's not based on color. And to even go down this direction is wrong, Mr. Chairman.
First of all, I want to thank the gentleman for what you have stated. If there's anyone who is sensitive with regard to race, it's me. Son of former sharecroppers that were basically slaves. So I get it. I listened very carefully to Ms. Tlaib, and I think, and I'm not going to put words in her mouth, but I think she said that she was not calling you a racist. And I thought that we could clarify that. Because, Mr. Meadows, you know, and of all the people on this committee, I've said it and got in trouble for it, that you're one of my best friends. I know that shocks a lot of people.
And likewise, Mr. Chairman.
But you are. And I could see and feel your pain. I feel it. And so, and I don't think Ms. Tlaib intended to cause you that kind of pain and that kind of frustration. Did you have a statement, Ms. Tlaib? I'm going to yield to you. We can just straighten this up.
Mr. Chairman, and to my colleague, Mr. Meadows, that was not my intention, and I do apologize if that's what it sounded like, but I said someone in general. And as everybody knows in this chamber, I'm pretty direct, so if I wanted to say that, I would have, but that's not what I said. And thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to clarify, but again, I said someone. And again, I was not referring to you at all as a racist.
Well, I thank the gentlewoman for her comments. I thank the chairman for working to clarify this, and I appreciate the chairman's intervening.
Now, to the gentleman, first of all, thank you for allowing us to resolve that. The gentleman had asked a little bit earlier.
I will withdraw my request.
Oh, you don't want to do the unanimous consent?
I need the unanimous consent, but I think I need to officially withdraw my request that it be stricken from.
Go on, withdraw it. You did it?
I did.
All right, sounds good. Now, I will recognize you for your unanimous consent. I think you want to put in the record some documents.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent that we put forth in the record the Vanity Fair article, which indicates that Michael Cohen must be the most gifted consultant in America, outlining his insights into government, healthcare, and policy and real estate, suggesting that it's not a real company, but and just like he's not a lawyer.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you. I ask unanimous consent that the LA Times article of July 16, 2018 actually be put in the record, which outlines the $1.2 million payment and their misgivings thereafter.
Without objection, so ordered. Any other unanimous consent requests? Size. Size.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to make the February 9th, 2019 Washington Post profile of Michael Cohen, titled Michael Cohen's Secret Agenda, part of the record. This story shows Cohen to be a selfish manipulator who is all about himself. It even has a false anecdote about how he once claimed to deliver his own son, his own baby.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to make the May 9th, 2018 Washington Post article, South Korean firm paid Michael Cohen $150,000 as it sought contract from U.S. government as part of the record. The article reported Korea Aerospace Industries paid a shell company run by Cohen.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to make Michael Cohen's sentencing statement to the Southern District of New York part of the record. The statement establishes that Michael Cohen continues to falsely blame his crimes on blind loyalty to the president, but only Cohen is to blame for his many false statements to financial institutions and the IRS.
Without objection, so ordered.
I ask unanimous consent to make the August 20th, 2018 CNN article, Fed scrutinizing Michael Cohen's former accountant and bank loans, part of the record. Cohen's accountant was subpoenaed to appear before a grand jury and required a lawyer. In his sentencing memo, prosecutors said Cohen attempted to blame his tax evasion on his accountant.
Without objection, so ordered.
Two more, real quickly.
Sure.
Ask unanimous consent to make the February 26, 2019 order filed by the Appellate Division of the State of New York regarding disciplinary proceedings against Michael Cohen part of the record. This order, which proactively applies starting February 28th, establishes Cohen committed a serious crime and ceased being an attorney when he was convicted of lying to Congress.
Without objection, so ordered.
And finally, Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to make the July 26, 2018 Washington Post article, Michael Cohen secretly recorded Trump. Does that make him a bad lawyer? Part of the record. The article describes potential ethical violations of a lawyer, Cohen, recording his client, Trump, without the client's knowledge.
Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Norman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I ask unanimous consent to make the January 18, 2019 Huffington Post article, 11 tweets from the fake fan account, Stud, Michael Cohen paid to fawn over him, part of the record. The account is described as a place for women who love and support Michael Cohen. Strong pit bull, sex symbol, no nonsense, business oriented, and ready to make it.
Without objection, so ordered. Mr. Roy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would ask unanimous consent to make the April 20th, 2018 article in Mother Jones titled Michael Cohen Says He's Never Been to Prague. He Told Me a Different Story, part of the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, sir.
Very well. Mr. Cohen, I have some concluding remarks. But before I do that, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would. I have some closing remarks I would like to say myself. Is this an appropriate time?
You can do it now.
Thank you. So first I want to thank you, Chairman, because I appreciate the opportunity to share some final thoughts. I have acknowledged I have made my own mistakes, and I have owned up to them publicly and under oath. But silence and complicity in the face of the daily destruction of our basic norms and civility to one another will not be one of them. I did things and I acted improperly, at times at Mr. Trump's behest. I blindly followed his demands. My loyalty to Mr. Trump has cost me everything. my family's happiness, friendships, my law license, my company, my livelihood, my honor, my reputation, and soon my freedom. And I will not sit back, say nothing, and allow him to do the same to the country. Indeed, given my experience working for Mr. Trump, I fear that if he loses the election in 2020, that there will never be a peaceful transition of power. And this is why I agreed to appear before you today. And in closing, I'd like to say directly to the President, we honor our veterans even in the rain. You tell the truth even when it doesn't aggrandize you. You respect the law and our incredible law enforcement agents. You don't villainize them. You don't disparage generals, Gold Star families, prisoners of war, and other heroes who had the courage to fight for this country. You don't attack the media and those who question what you don't like or what you don't want them to say. And you take responsibility for your own dirty deeds. You don't use your power of your bully pulpit to destroy the credibility of those who speak out against you. You don't separate families from one another or demonize those looking to America for a better life. You don't vilify people based on the God they pray to, and you don't cuddle up to our adversaries at the expense of our allies. And finally, you don't shut down the government before Christmas and New Year's just to simply appease your base. This behavior is churlish, it denigrates the office of the President, and it's simply un-American. And it's not you. So to those who support the President and his rhetoric, as I once did, I pray the country doesn't make the same mistakes that I have made or pay the heavy price that my family and I are paying. And I thank you very much for this additional time, Chairman.
Thank you very much. The ranking member has a closing statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We know Mr. Cohen has been dishonest in the past. That's why he's going to prison in 2 months. But there are things today that he said during the several hours of questioning that just don't add up either. He said he never defrauded any bank when he was having a conversation questioning from Mr. Comer. Obviously, that's not true because he's going to prison for that very offense. He said today he was a good lawyer who understood the need to represent his client with legal advice. But in his written testimony, he said he never bothered to consider whether payments to women were improper, much less the right thing to do. He attested in his signed truth and testimony form that he did not have any reportable contracts with foreign government entities. Earlier, he admitted to having consulting agreements with at least 2 foreign entities owned in part by foreign governments, BTA Bank of Kazakhstan and Korea Aerospace Industries of South Korea. He said to Chairman Cummings that Donald Trump directed him and the Trump Organization CFO Alan Weiselberg to, quote, go back to his office and figure out how to make the $130,000 payment. But in his testimony, he says, Mr. Trump directed me to use my own personal funds from the home equity line of credit to avoid any money being traced back to him that could negatively impact the campaign. And in response to a question about him paying to set up the fake Twitter account at Women for Cohen, that he didn't direct the commission of that Twitter account. He says, I didn't set that up, and it was done by a young lady that works for the firm, when in fact, he did ask the IT firm Redfinch to set it up, according to the owner of Redfinch. And finally, he said he didn't want a job with the administration, even though the attorneys with the Southern District of New York stated that this was a fact. When asked about this, they said, I wouldn't call them liars, but that statement is not accurate. Mr. Chairman, I think maybe more importantly is what we should have been doing today. Mr. Meadows and I sent you a letter asking you to have Mr. Rosenstein here. I think it's important to know that last week when you announced that Mr. Cohen was coming this week, just happened to be the very same week that we learned the Deputy Attorney General of the United States was thinking about wearing a wire to record the Commander-in-Chief, was actually contemplating talking to cabinet members and invoking the 25th Amendment. That's what we should be focused on, not this sad display we've had to go through the last several hours. And again, it's not my words. You can take the words of the former General Counsel for the House of Representatives under Tip O'Neill. So I hope we've learned some things here today. But Mr. Chairman, as I said earlier, your first big hearing, the first announced witness of the 116th Congress, is a gentleman who is going to prison in 2 months for lying to Congress. I don't think that's what we should be focused on. Yield back.
Thank you very much. You know, I've sat here and I've listened to all of this, and it's very painful. It's very painful. You made a lot of mistakes, Mr. Cohen, and you've admitted that. And, you know, one of the saddest parts of this whole thing is that some very innocent people are hurting too. And you acknowledge that. And that's your family. And so you come here today and I deep in my heart, after, you know, and when I practiced law, I represented a lot of lawyers who got in trouble. And you've come saying I had made my mistakes, but now I want to change my life. And you know, if we as a nation did not give people an opportunity after they made mistakes to change their lives, a whole lot of people would not do very well. I don't know where you go from here. As I sat here and I listened to both sides, I just felt as if, and you know, people are now using my words that they took from me, that didn't give me any credit. We're better than this. We are so much, we really are. As a country, we are so much better than this. And, you know, I told you, and for some reason, Mr. Cohen, I tell my children, I say, when bad things happen to you, do not ask the question, why did it happen to me? Ask the question, why did it happen for me? I don't know why this is happening for you, but it is my hope that a small part of it is for our country to be better. If I hear you correctly, it sounds like you're crying out for a new normal, for us getting back to normal. It sounds to me like you want to make sure that our democracy stays intact. When the one meeting I had with President Trump, I said to him, the greatest gift that you and I, Mr. President, can give to our children is making sure that we give them a democracy that is intact. A democracy better than the one that we came upon. And I'm hoping that the things you said today will help us begin to get back there. You know, I mean, come on now. I mean, when you got, according to the Washington Post, our president has made at least 8,718 false or misleading statements. That's stunning. That's not what we teach our children. I don't teach mine that. And for whatever reason, sounds like you got caught up in it. You got caught up in it. You got caught up in it. And some kind of way, I hope that you will, I know that it's painful going to prison. I know it's got to be painful being called a rat. And let me explain. A lot of people don't know the significance of that, but I live in the inner city of Baltimore. All right? And when you call somebody a rat, that's one of the worst things you can call them, because when they go to prison, that means a snitch. I'm just saying. And so the president called you a rat. We're better than that. We really are. And I'm hoping that all of us can get back to this democracy that we want and that we should be passing on to our children so that they can do better than what we did. And so you wonder whether people believe you. I don't know. I don't know whether they believe you. But the fact is that you come, you have your head down, and this has got to be one of the hardest things that you could do. Let me tell you the picture that really, really pained me. You were leaving the prison, you were leaving the courthouse, and I guess it's your daughter had a braces or something on. Man, that thing hurt me. As a father of two daughters, it hurt me. And I can imagine how it must feel for you. But I'm just saying to you, I want to first of all thank you. I know that this has been hard. I know that you face a lot. I know that you are worried about your family. But this is a part of your destiny. And hopefully, this portion of your destiny will lead to a better Michael Cohen, a better Donald Trump, a better United States of America, and a better world. And I mean that from the depths of my heart. When we're dancing with the angels, the question will be asked, in 2019, what did we do to make sure we kept our democracy intact? Did we stand on the sidelines and say nothing? Did we play games? And I'm tired of these statements saying, people come in here and say, oh, this is the first hearing. It is not the first hearing. The first hearing was with regard to prescription drugs. Remember, a little girl, a lady sat there, Miss Wortham, her daughter died because she could not get $333 a month in insulin. That was our first hearing. Second hearing, H.R. 1, voting rights, corruption in government. Come on now. We can do more than one thing. And we have got to get back to normal. With that, this meeting is adjourned.
You're good. You're good there. Here comes Cohen. Here comes Cohen.
Mr. Cohen, right here. Right here, sir. First of all, I want to say thank you all for being here today. I am humbled. I am thankful to Chairman Cummings for giving me the opportunity today to tell my truth. And I hope that, as Chairman Cummings said, it helps in order to heal America. And I thank you all again, and have a good day.
How involved was Donald Trump Jr. in the hush money? How involved was Donald Trump Jr.?
Retaliate against you.
How involved was Donald Trump Jr. in the hush money?
Well, later you have.
Shock if you're still with us, Michael Cohen.